Hey, welcome to a brand new episode of the Digital Adoption Show, your go to podcast for cutting edge insights and innovative strategies in today's dynamic work environment. I'm your host, Shreya Shrivastava, Senior Customer Success Manager at Work.The, and today we will explore how AI in HR will change the way we look at managing people. To discuss the same, we have a great guest on our podcast, Jason. Jason Radisson is the CEO and founder of Movo, a pioneer human capital management platform aimed at modernizing the process of hiring, engaging, retaining the frontline workforce. His journey in tech innovation spans over 20 years, marked by scaling tech unicorns and enhancing work standard for millions. That's crazy. His strategic and operational expertise was owned by McKinsey Company and further demonstrated through his leadership roles at Uber and 99 Taxis, where he achieved significant growth and successful exits. Driven by a personal mission rooted in his early experience of poverty, Jason is dedicated to empowering the frontline workforce through advanced technology. I'm sure he has a lot to talk about his company Movo, which is doing great work when it comes to the HR space. So maybe why don't we hear it from you, Jason, more a bit about your academics and Movo itself as a company.
Yeah, sure. So just brief introduction, and thanks, Shreya, for that. From my part, my name is Jason Radisson, multiple founder and startup executive. I've been in the technology space for a long time, and I'm really interested in sort of the challenges of helping people to get ahead, and particularly the career opportunities that you get when you start out working practical jobs, frontline jobs, which was my own history, and then getting more skills and more education and being able to elevate yourself to better careers. Movo is a company that, was an idea I had about 10 years ago where I started working in the gig economy. I'd been an algorithms guy in e-commerce. I worked on a bunch of the big algorithmic platforms in e-commerce in the previous generation of companies. And I thought, there's definitely an opportunity to take mobile technology and digitize traditional work, traditional frontline work, beyond sort of taxi driving and kind of the normal transportation stuff that we're all really familiar with, or delivery. So in parallel, I was working on a couple of different companies, some with some great successes. And about 4 years or so ago, the team and I made the move, starting the company and moving over full time to build this company. And our first target was going after manufacturing logistics employees and trying to sort of take out all the frictions of being an employee, about getting a job. There's high rotation and churn in those jobs, doing things with software to make it easier to sort of be a good employee and to get ahead in those roles. And since then, our ambition is the same, but our software has definitely expanded. And we're, I think, going for a space that's open in the world right now in terms of who is going to be the primary technology platform for big companies that employ a lot of people. There's the HR tech companies we all know. We know Oracle and we know Work.The and know all of these different companies, CP, that are involved in this space. Nobody really uses that software very much, in a sense, maybe a time or two a month, versus in the gig economy and what's really possible with mobile technology, that you can really run your entire team all day long in a mobile service like Movo. So that's really what we were aiming towards, and that's the company that we're building in a nutshell.
That sounds exciting, and I have a lot of questions for you in that area as
Sure.
well. I think it's kind of really varied because again, you come from really great scholar background. You did your advanced studies from Harvard, so it kind of just makes me curious on all the learnings that I'll get to share with you on the platform today. So yeah, welcome again to our
Awesome.
podcast. Okay, so before we dive deep into the main discussion, let's kick off this new episode with a segment that we have introduced called as the Digital Pulse. Now, this is where we try to connect the dots between the passion and the profession. So we got to know a bit about your profession, but I'm pretty sure everyone would be really willing to understand and know what your passion is. So uncovering how individual journeys shape visionary leadership, let's understand you more from the outside work. Okay, so Jason, there's one of the things I wanted to ask. Is there a passion or activity outside of work that's particularly close to your heart?
Yeah, I have a family. We have young kids and teenagers, and I think their development is something that's very close to my heart. I think it's a difficult era to be a parent with the technology that's available, with the workforce evolution that's available, and sort of bringing up your kids to be balanced citizens of the world and figuring out the right role of technology in their upbringing. I think those things are a passion and frankly, outside of work, a big part of what I think about and what I do.
That's great because even I kind of always try to maintain that thing with my family. And I'll try to go home always once I'm done with my work or whatever leaves I have. So I'm able to relate to
Mm.
that aspect. So yeah, it's always good to spend time with the family. Okay, next we move to our short rapid fire round, which we call as the triple strike, where we ask our guests three quirky questions and expect a fun answer to get deeper glimpse into their minds. So, are you ready to be triple strike, Jason?
Sure.
Okay, so the first question that I have is time travel or space travel? Which one would you choose for your next vacation and why?
Time travel over space travel, because with space travel, we don't have any infrastructure. I think it's wonderful the idea we would all move to Mars, but it sounds like a
Mhm,
potentially a long time living in a tent, basically. No, time travel, and I think in particular, I'm really interested in
mhm.
the early American history and the colonial
Oh,
period. And I think the whole experiment, we have a country that started as a thought experiment. I think as you get into the US history in the early
yeah.
days, it was very much like a startup. There were a lot of things that were touch and go. There were a lot
Right.
of hypotheses being figured out. There was a lot of, trying to stake out territory even before things had solidified. If you look at
Mhm.
the way the colonial powers traded land, which
Oh,
really belonged to Native Americans, but
yeah.
then there was like this discovery right and this crazy stuff. A lot of that reminds me of the startup world. I'd love to see that period.
That's interesting. And lately I visited Philadelphia, where we had a lot to do with, how all the history and how people came and went, and all about Native
Yeah.
Americans. So it's being beautifully depicted. And I'm pretty sure I would also like to go there because I was there a few months back in Philly, and it actually intrigued me to understand how things happen. We don't really know from where we started, and now it's like a superpower. Absolutely
Indeed,
interesting.
it must have been crazy. For the first 40 or 50 years, most of the
Yeah.
budget went to trying to secure these territories, which is just amazing if you put that in today's, context where, spending 2% of a budget on defense or 4%.
Mhm.
Imagine the whole early US budget went to essentially defense and national boundaries and these conflicts with Native Americans. Crazy period.
Oh my God, yeah, that's crazy. And I can go on
Yeah,
talking about this. Yeah, I think we
yeah,
can definitely talk more about it offline for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so next question. If you could automate one of your life tasks, which currently cannot be automated, what would that be?
Appointment making and sort of family logistics. Why is
I'm
it
pretty
so
sure
hard
every
to get
married
a
man want to do that.
right? Why is it so hard to get a kid's dentist appointment? Nuts.
Crazy. But yeah, that's something I'm pretty sure everyone wants to do, how we can balance
Yeah.
those things. Okay. But the next question I have for you is if you could download one skill into your brain, Matrix movie style, what would it be and what would you do with it?
I love the game of chess, and I have never spent enough time on it to have studied it to be more than an intermediate player. I would
Mhm.
love to really play the game like with virtuosity, and I just don't. It's thousands of hours of study. No way. I would love to download that skill.
Crazy. That's amazing. Still trying to discover your more informal part, but maybe we get to unveil a lot of it once I have like more deep questions for you.
Sure.
Okay, so moving on, a lot to do with where you started, Jason. So we often host CEOs and founders on a podcast. And to start with, could you tell us more about yourself, your journey in the corporate world, and what inspired you to start Movo? You gave a brief introduction about it in the
Mhm.
start, but again, what is that inspiring thing once you were looking? to have
Yeah,
your
yeah.
own company, Movo?
I think there are different models of being a founder, and there are different models. I consider myself a founder and a technologist.
Mhm.
My particular model is, I think the problem is the problem. I think I've been working on the frontline work problem, how to help blue collar and skilled professionals get ahead and get more productive and get ahead in life in various forms for something like 30 years. But I think the approach of technology is, and I had a couple of roles fairly early on, and going back really even to studies where I saw, where you could take a set of math and technological skills and apply them to a problem and tremendously improve the solution of that problem in the world. One of the things I worked on in grad school was the distribution of US aid we had
Mhm.
in my faculty. We had a lot of projects with USAID. And so, part of what I spent my time as a graduate student on was building models of where really to put the aid and where it could have the most impact. And, in some sense, there are venture capitalists that have quantitative teams that do this kind of work as well. That work first really opened my eyes to the ability of being able to sort of like make very elevated data rich decisions about things that had huge impact. When I went in my first job after grad school to McKinsey, I did a lot of similar projects. And
Mhm.
my role in particular was sort of helping companies to merge and cleaning up in post-merger environments, which oftentimes is, really large companies, hundreds of thousands of jobs of frontline workers, and deciding how to reteam them, how the combined company should deploy these workers. And I did that work for about 10 years and built a number of processes. And I think the other thing is sort of there's the math, then there's the process, then how you apply it in technology. And I think it's sort of the ideal training for sort of deployment of algorithms, machine learning and AI into large businesses. I think that's really where my passion became this career and this skill set. And, the thing about all that I've sort of learned is, anywhere you've got new stuff happening in the world, there's always the technology is generally a little bit set. Like it's not, entirely fresh. We have
Great.
these generative AI models with the LLMs that are out there. Who knows where that's going to go? We probably need another 20 years to make something out of it. So in that
Mhm.
early phase, you need change management people and people with that kind
Yeah.
of leadership to put the technology into businesses and enough technology background. And as I said, you're not going to be, nobody comes through university knowing how to deploy the mobile internet. We were all trying to figure it out
Mhm.
25 or so years ago. And now, a lot of these different technologies as they've come up. So, I think that's the bottom line is sort of figuring out your approach as an entrepreneur. And that really has been mine, taking technologies that could potentially really impact millions of workers and then putting them into the world in a startup or in a big company, in an existing company.
Sounds great. And I'm able to relate that. You did mention about the change management, right? So even where we
Yeah.
work, what fix, it kind of aims at that, the challenge that a lot of our customers would come up to us and say, we don't really see people adopting to that change, right? So that's one of the
Yeah.
things that we also and what fix have been trying to implement. Again, change is part of the life. We have to go along with machine learning, AI, what's there in the market, and so does, everyone.
Yeah, yeah. And oftentimes the processes they're completely different, and I think in
Agree.
in the technology industry, we have a lot of best practices and just sort of ways of working, and everybody eventually loses their way. At some point you're just a large company and these things are
Mhm.
super hard. But there's a beautiful phase where you've got a big business, and anytime you want to do something new, you're able to quickly spin up a team and go do a new business,
Mhm.
a new product, a new feature in a way where, a couple of leaders, of true leaders in that early stage of that endeavor, pick it up and start to scale it up and then bring more people onto the team so that it can grow and become the new business line in your company or the
Yeah.
entirely new way of working. And I think with Movo, we're looking at the HR field as
Mhm.
really, I mean, there's no way to really sugarcoat it. There's going to be an age not too distant in the future where we do HR in a very different way. Most of HR, headcount wise, most HR professionals in the world are doing compliance work. And
Mhm.
compliance work is exactly the stuff that AIs do exceptionally well. So, I look at it at the HR industry and I say there's always going to be, just like there will always be finance leaders, there will always
Yeah.
be HR leaders. But a lot of
Agree.
those mid-level, entry-level jobs are just going to go away. And I think that's not specifically what we're addressing with Movo. Really, we're more addressing operational awareness and sort of tactical deployment of teams and optimizing workforces. But from the HR space, I think there's really this great opportunity for AI to be transformative.
Actually, you answered the next question that I had for you was in terms of any of the challenges that you would have faced, while working in Movo, any of the it's kind of providing that insights to all of those HR or the SCM leaders, right? So
Yeah.
again, any challenging situation that you came across during your tenure and how you approached it?
Yeah, I think, so many challenges along the way. As startup captains, we make thousands of decisions a quarter, and, not all of them are great.
Yeah.
We always strive to get better and better at decision making, and small teams, I think, do a fairly decent job with it. What I would highlight is just, I think the real challenge in sort of broad enterprise technology is this cannibalization effect. How do you displace the big incumbents that are in the space? And I think there's so much that the systems integration companies, to name some of the names, places like Accenture, places like IBM, places like Slalom, some of the more specialized companies are out there really helping their large corporate clients to integrate the latest
Mhm.
technologies into the hundreds of technologies they already buy.
Mhm.
If it's a Fortune 500 company, then to also manage all the change management, the rewriting of processes, the retraining of employees. I think as a startup captain, one of the hardest things, most challenging things in the enterprise space is connecting with that group and sort of bringing your technology into broader and broader audiences. It's easy, relatively easy to get a few first clients and to start to prove your technology, but then the scaling and working with the bigger channel partners that are out there, I think that's really the 5 to 10 year problem that I think most of us are facing.
I agree. And this is one thing you mentioned about the AI and machine learning. So my
Mhm.
next question kind of goes around with that. So year 2020 was largely focused on AI, ML, you would have seen everyone talking about it. So where do you
Sure.
think we stand in 2024 with AI in HR and human capital management and any of the things that you feel that is gonna be different in 2024 altogether for let's say Movo as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're getting to a place where more people are experimenting. The Economist had a piece a few months back on how little adoption there was of any AI technology in the Fortune 500.
Agreed.
I think we're getting to a place where I would love to see a refresh of those numbers. Hopefully, my sense is it'll be a lot higher. Everybody's got a few things they're experimenting
Mhm.
with. It's hard to say very broadly because I think it does the technology itself is still in that foundational phase. It's a little bit, people have made other comparisons. What did we say about mobile phones in 2008 or 2009, and we didn't really fully comprehend all the business models and
Exactly.
all of the things that would come up, right? Our bet with Movo is there's a big opportunity to digitize the frontline workforce because you can give them a mobile phone and it's a proven model. Any of us that have been in the general management structure running any of these gig economy companies, we're used to looking at 1 million employees in real time and making decisions. It's a different war room. You have
Yeah.
monitors on all the walls, and it's a little bit more like truly running a platform from a platform operations room. that future is available, and that's the future that we're working towards with Movo. For a lot of the typical B2B and enterprise problems, AI is going to take a while because it's going to require robotics. It's going to take 5 to 10 times as long as they do in software. It's going to require a lot of instrumentation. Consumer has been so easy in quotes because everybody has a PC and everybody has a mobile phone and off you go. A complex petrochemicals operation, the machinery, you've got to
Yeah.
get instrumentation on all of that machinery. So I just think we're going to have a period of, I don't know, let's call it 5 to 50 years where AI for big companies is going to be in very limited spaces. It's just going to take a long time.
Makes sense. And you gave a very great example of when we could have never imagined, what mobile phones were back in 2008 and now.
Right?
Even, when I look at my journey in BotFix, when I started, we were called like a DAP company, like a digital adoption
Mhm.
space. We were their leaders, but eventually we have to evolve. And that's when we got in multi-product, we got in our whole analytics. We got in the AI as well because we have to be there in the market, right? So in 2023 is when
Right.
we actually started implementing the whole AI model in place. And now we do have that, being implemented at certain places. So I think it's all
Yeah.
about evolving over a period of time, but depends on which domain you are, right? It can take from 5 to
Yeah.
50 years of experience, like years, right? So that's a good point that you mentioned.
100%.
And again, the next question that I have is kind of related to it. So could you share an example where AI has significantly improved the efficiency or effectiveness of HR operations for one of your client companies?
Yeah, yeah. So some of the big use cases that we're working on involve scheduling and the friction around being on a roster, being a part of a team, and then just the modern things. Employees are looking for more flexibility since the pandemic. And so many, whatever countries listeners are in and whatever labor markets listeners are in, so many of us are experiencing both high churn and shortage of workers. And so one of the key areas that we're working on with our clients is completely automating the scheduling process. So
Oh,
you look at these large retail companies, or if you
mm,
look at large manufacturing, logistics,
yeah.
hospitals, supervisors, and even very senior supervisors can spend half of their time or more on scheduling people.
Right.
So one of our key areas of automation is that, and the net impact is that there's usually a strong reduction in employee turnover. There's a great reduction in flexibility because people can essentially interact with a bot and pick up shifts or, hand off shifts to a colleague or this
Yeah.
kind of thing. There are other areas. I think the talent automation space, which is the first problem that we tackled in the pandemic with some success. We hired 700,000 people in the pandemic on our platform. I think that space is relatively well known. The product is, completely removed sort of you have a mobile experience where a worker just sort of onboards themselves or a candidate onboards themselves. I think that is another area that will become more broadly adopted, and there's just such an advantage. People are able to be hired in a few minutes and begin work weeks ahead of time. I think that's a big one. Beyond that, like tasks is another area where we think there's a big opportunity in HR and operations for automation, and that's automatically dispatching tasks across the company to the workers who have the skills and the availability and are in the right location, frankly, to be able to handle the task. So there's a bunch out there already where overall the impact of digitizing the frontline workforce can be 10, 20, or more percentage point improvement in productivity. And for large companies, it's the single biggest cost item for them is their frontline salaries. So it's real meaningful bottom line impact. And we're having this kind of impact with the different use cases that I mentioned in many different countries, in different situations. What everyone has in common is a difficult labor market and a lot of employees. And if those two
Yeah.
things are
Mhm.
there, chances are you're going to have a big impact from digitizing your frontline workforce.
That sounds interesting. And you spoke of scheduling. I was able to relate to that because I have my customers who do mention that, leave any other job, Shreya. We take a lot of time, our frontline, the nurses and the health professional, they have to kind of spend a lot of time scheduling, right? And the
Yeah,
first thing that they ask as a use case when I talk to them is, how can we get rid of this? How can we make it more automated, right? With the help of Whatfix. So that's
right.
the first thing they ask. So it's a very critical problem because from a holistic view, when we see it, it doesn't look like, okay, it's just a matter of scheduling, but there's a lot of things which is kind of associated to that.
And if you look at,
Yeah.
not everybody has the sort of the same patterns, and some of
Yeah.
that difference in patterns inside the company make things particularly challenging. In hospitals, it's generally the ER, the emergency room, which has crazy fluctuation in need. When you've got a pool of nurses and doctors throughout the company that might be cross-trained and able to work there, but they're on a different schedule. And as long as the company doesn't have systems to recognize it, it relies on frontline supervisors to be calling people, trying to get them into work to cover. These are a lot of inefficiencies in the world. And as I said, these frontline jobs are not going away anytime soon because they require robotics. It's not just a, software in the cloud kind of a job. So we've got this opportunity, maybe the next 20 or 30 years, to really optimize them and really help people get ahead.
Awesome. Awesome. That's been a fantastic discussion. I think we kind of covered all of the points from, we went from HR to the AI space and, what we plan to
Mhm.
do. So it's been incredible to have this discussion with you, Jason. And I'm pretty sure whatever questions our listener would have, they can reach out to you via LinkedIn, or maybe you can share the place where they can reach out to. So to our listeners, we encourage you to explore these enlightening conversations on the Digital Adoption Show across all major platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, YouTube, and more. Whether you are at home or you are in traffic, you can go and listen to the podcast. So, again, thank you so much, Jason, for sharing your incredible knowledge overall in the HR space. And yeah, we look to connecting with you. This is Shreya signing off for the day. Stay tuned for more engaging and informative episodes. Thank you so much, guys.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.